Millionaire senior in shabby clothes, humiliated at fancy restaurant. "Get this homeless man out of here immediately." Victoria Sterling's voice echoed through Le Jardin, one of Beverly Hills' most exclusive restaurants. The elderly man in shabby clothes stood quietly, dignity intact, as security approached him. "Ma'am, I have a reservation," he said softly, reaching for his pocket. "Stop him," Victoria commanded. "He might be dangerous." Wealthy diners pulled out their phones, recording the scene with smirks on their faces. A young woman in a chef's coat burst through the kitchen doors, her face turning pale. "What's happening here?" Emily Thompson asked, but it was too late. The security guards were already escorting her grandfather out, while Victoria smugly straightened her designer blazer. What happened next would forever change the meaning of wealth in Beverly Hills. IBM headquarters, Silicon Valley, 1975. Marcus Thompson's mop moved methodically across the computer lab floor at 2 a.m. The giant machines hummed around him, their lights blinking like stars. He paused, pulled out a worn notebook from his pocket, and carefully wrote down the words he'd seen on one of the screens earlier. "What are you doing?" A sharp voice made him jump. Mr. Peterson, the programming department head, stood in the doorway. "Janitors aren't allowed to touch the computers." "Sir, I was just learning. I've been studying programming at night school and—" "Listen," Peterson cut him off. "People like you don't become programmers. Know your place." He snatched Marcus's notebook and threw it in the trash. "Clean this floor again. I can still see spots." That night, Marcus returned to the tiny trailer he shared with his wife, Sarah. She was still in her Woolworth's waitress uniform, counting coins on their wobbly table. "How much do we have?" Marcus asked, slumping into a chair. "Almost enough for next semester." Sarah smiled, but her eyes showed worry. "Just need about $200 more. "Sarah, maybe we should stop. Mr. Peterson's right. Who am I kidding? I'm just a janitor." Sarah stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. She disappeared into their tiny bedroom and returned with a small velvet box. Inside was her grandmother's ring, the only thing of value she owned. "My grandma survived the Great Depression wearing this ring," she said, her voice firm. "She taught me that true wealth isn't what you wear or own, it's who you are." She placed the ring in Marcus's hand. "Tomorrow, we're going to the pawn shop. You're getting your education." "But Sarah, this is your family's legacy." "No, Marcus. Our legacy will be proving that appearances don't define character." She touched his face gently. "One day, you'll show them all. And you'll do it with kindness." Marcus clutched the ring, tears in his eyes. "I promise, Sarah, one day I'll make this right." What no one knew then was that this pawned ring would become a symbol of a social revolution that would rock Beverly Hills to its core. And it would all start with a humiliation at one of the city's most prestigious restaurants, over 40 years later. That night in 1975, as Sarah fell asleep still wearing her waitress uniform, she couldn't know that one day her own aprons would hang in golden frames, teaching the wealthy a lesson about true class. And Marcus, setting his alarm for another 4 a.m. shift, couldn't imagine that his next encounter with Mr. Peterson would come decades later, in circumstances that would leave everyone speechless. But for now, in their tiny trailer home, surrounded by Sarah's textbooks on restaurant management and Marcus's programming manuals, they held on to their dreams with calloused hands and determined hearts. The same hands that served coffee and mopped floors would one day build an empire. Not of money, but of something far more valuable: dignity. Beverly Hills General Hospital, 2 years ago. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the quiet hospital room. Sarah Thompson lay in bed, her once vibrant face now pale against the white pillows. She'd been hiding the severity of her cancer from her family for months, not wanting to worry them. Marcus sat beside her, holding her hand just as he had done in their trailer park days. Their granddaughter Emily paced the room in her chef's uniform, having rushed straight from work when the doctor called. "Emily, sweetheart," Sarah called softly, "come here." Emily sat on the edge of the bed, fighting back tears. "I'm quitting my job, Grandma. I need to be here with you." "You'll do no such thing," Sarah said firmly. "I didn't spend 40 years serving coffee so you could give up on your dreams." She motioned for Marcus to bring over the old cardboard box from the corner. Inside were her collection of waitress aprons, each telling its own story of perseverance. "These aprons built our life," Sarah said, touching them gently. "Each coffee stain, each grease mark, they're not marks of shame. They're badges of honor." Emily picked up one of the aprons, recognizing the Woolworths logo. "I remember you wearing this one when you taught me to make your special apple pie." Sarah smiled weakly. "And now you're making those pies in Beverly Hills' finest kitchens." Her expression turned serious. "Promise me something, Emily. Promise you'll never forget where these recipes came from." "I promise, Grandma." Sarah turned to Marcus, her voice growing weaker. "Now you, my love. I need 3 promises from you." Marcus leaned closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "First, keep living simply. Don't let money change who you are." She paused, catching her breath. "Second, help others silently. The best kind of giving is when nobody knows the giver." "And the third?" Marcus asked softly, "When the time comes, and it will come, correct injustice the right way. Not with anger, but with dignity, the way we've always done things." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I don't understand, Sarah. What injustice?" Sarah's eyes filled with knowing tears. "Life has a way of testing our principles, Marcus. Just remember, true wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in the lives we touch." She reached for the box again, pulling out her newest apron. "Emily, this is for your future restaurant, the one you'll open someday." "Grandma, I can't afford a restaurant," Emily protested. "You just focus on being the best chef you can be. The rest will take care of itself." Sarah looked meaningfully at Marcus. "Sometimes angels come disguised as ordinary people." As night fell, Sarah's breathing became more labored. The doctors had warned this might be her last night. Emily had stepped out to get coffee, leaving Marcus alone with his wife of 45 years. "Marcus," Sarah whispered, "when I'm gone, people will judge you by your old clothes and simple ways. Let them. Sometimes the best lessons come from being underestimated." "Sarah, please don't talk like that," Marcus pleaded. "Promise me you'll stay strong when it happens. Promise me you'll remember what true dignity looks like." Marcus didn't know what she meant, but he promised anyway. How could he know that 2 years later, her words would guide him through one of the most humiliating moments of his life? As Sarah drifted off to sleep, she smiled softly. "You'll understand soon enough, my love. Sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from moments of unkindness." Emily returned with the coffee, but Sarah had fallen into a deep sleep. She passed away peacefully that night, leaving behind a legacy of love, dignity, and mysterious warnings about a future none of them could yet see. What no one in that hospital room knew was that Sarah's last wishes weren't just random thoughts from a dying woman. They were carefully planted seeds that would bloom into a garden of redemption, teaching Beverly Hills a lesson about true class that no one would ever forget. Present day, Beverly Hills. "We're letting you go, Emily," the restaurant manager said. "With the pandemic, we simply can't keep all our staff." Emily Thompson stood in the empty kitchen where she'd worked for the past 5 years, another casualty of COVID-19. As she packed her knives, her phone buzzed, a text from her grandfather Marcus. "Come over for dinner," it read. "I have an idea." Later that evening, in Marcus's modest apartment, Emily picked at her microwave dinner. "All the restaurants are either closed or laying people off," she sighed. "Maybe it's time to give up on being a chef." Marcus set down his fork. "Or maybe it's time to open your own restaurant." Emily laughed. "Grandpa, do you know how much that costs in Beverly Hills? What if I told you an anonymous investor is interested in your talent?" "Good." Marcus smiled. "That's the point of anonymous, isn't it? Just focus on being the best chef you can be. The rest is taken care of." 2 months later, Emily stood in front of her own restaurant. Les Jardins was everything she dreamed of, though she still wondered about the mysterious investor. "You need a strong manager," her business advisor said. "Someone who knows Beverly Hills. Enter Victoria Sterling." Her resume was impeccable, her references stellar. What Emily didn't know was that Victoria was living a lie. That evening, Victoria sat in her small apartment counting bills. The electricity notice marked "Final Warning" sat on her table. Her phone rang, a familiar voice she'd hoped never to hear again. "Hello, Victoria," the voice said. "Remember me? From the old Woolworths days?" Victoria's hand trembled. "What do you want, Janet?" "I saw you're managing that fancy new restaurant. Quite a step up from our waitressing days. Does anyone there know about your past? Or how you lost everything in 2008? Leave me alone. $5,000 and your secret stays safe. Victoria looked at her bank balance. $342.17. She'd have to choose between paying rent or maintaining her image. At Le Jardin, Victoria transformed the restaurant into an exclusive haven for the wealthy. She turned away anyone who didn't match her standards of suitable clientele. We need to maintain certain standards, she told Emily, sending away an elderly couple who'd saved for months for their anniversary dinner. Emily watched from the kitchen, her grandmother's words echoing, "Never forget where these recipes came from." But Victoria's carefully constructed facade was cracking. Every morning, she took the bus to Beverly Hills, changing into designer clothes in the restaurant's bathroom. Every evening, she returned to her cramped apartment, eating microwave dinners alone. One day, a senior citizen came in for lunch. Victoria started her usual routine of subtle discrimination. "I'm sorry, we're fully booked," she said, despite several empty tables. Emily emerged from the kitchen. "That table just canceled," she said, pointing to a prime spot. "We can seat him there." Victoria's face tightened, but she had no choice. As she walked the man to his table, she didn't notice Emily watching with growing concern. Later that night, Victoria received another text from Janet. "Payment due tomorrow, or everyone learns about the real Victoria Sterling." She opened her wallet. Still not enough. Tomorrow, she'd have to choose. Pay her rent or protect her secret. What Victoria didn't know was that her world of appearances was about to shatter. And it would start with an elderly man in simple clothes, trying to celebrate what would have been his wife's birthday. Sometimes the most carefully built facades crumble with a single moment of truth. For Victoria Sterling, that moment was just hours away. Le Jardin was bustling with its usual evening crowd when Marcus Thompson arrived for his dinner reservation. He'd chosen this night carefully. It would have been Sarah's birthday. "Can I help you?" Victoria's voice dripped with disdain as she looked at the elderly man standing before her podium. "Yes, I have a reservation for 7 p.m., Thompson." Victoria glanced at her list, then back at Marcus. "I'm sorry, but I think you must be mistaken. This is Le Jardin." "I know. My granddaughter Emily." "Security," Victoria called out. "We have a situation." Diners turned to stare. Several pulled out their phones, already recording. "Please," Marcus said calmly, "just check your list." "I will not have homeless people disturbing our guests," Victoria announced loudly. "This is Beverly Hills' finest establishment." 2 security guards approached. Behind them, Emily was racing from the kitchen, recognizing her grandfather's voice. "Wait," Emily shouted, but the guards had already grabbed Marcus's arms. "This man claims to have a reservation," Victoria told the guards. "Clearly, he's confused, or worse." Emily pushed through the crowd. "Stop! That's my grandfather." But it was too late. The video was already spreading across social media. Le Jardin's shame started trending within hours. Back in the kitchen, Emily's hands shook as she read the comments. "Disgusting treatment of the elderly. Boycott Le Jardin. This is what's wrong with Beverly Hills." "We're getting cancellations," the hostess reported. "Lots of them." Emily's finger hovered over her phone, tempted to reveal the truth about who really owned Le Jardin. One call to her grandfather could end this nightmare. But Marcus's message was clear. "Don't say anything, Emily. Trust me." Victoria sat in her office, watching the video go viral. Something about the old man seemed familiar. She'd seen those kind eyes before, somewhere long ago. A memory flickered. Woolworths, early morning shifts, an elderly couple who always left extra-large tips. Could it be? Her phone buzzed. Janet again? Saw the video. "Price just went up to 10,000. You're famous now, Vicky." Victoria's hands trembled as she opened her desk drawer. Inside was her old Woolworths name tag, a reminder of where she came from. Next to it lay her eviction notice. Emily paced the kitchen, remembering her grandmother's words. Sometimes the best lessons come from being underestimated. The local news picked up the story. Exclusive Beverly Hills restaurant accused of elder discrimination. Reservations canceled by the dozen. Regular customers posted apologies for ever dining there. Food critics promised to revise their reviews. "We have to do something," Emily told her grandfather over the phone. "We will," Marcus replied calmly, "but not what they expect." Victoria stood at her window, watching protesters gather outside the restaurant. Signs read, "Shame on Le Jardin" and "Respect our elders." She didn't notice Emily watching her, didn't see the tears in her eyes as she clutched her old name tag. That evening, Emily found a note slipped under her office door. Inside was a worn photo from Woolworths, showing a young waitress serving an elderly couple. On the back was written, "To Victoria, never forget where you came from. Your regulars, Marcus and Sarah Thompson." Emily's eyes widened. Her grandmother's words suddenly made sense. Sometimes angels come disguised as ordinary people. But before she could confront Victoria, her phone buzzed with another crisis. Their largest investor was threatening to pull out. What no one knew was that Marcus Thompson had already set his plan in motion. A plan that would transform Le Jardin from a symbol of shame into something far more powerful. Sometimes the biggest scandals lead to the most beautiful transformations. And for Le Jardin, the transformation was just beginning. Victoria Sterling, from socialite to waitress, the truth behind Le Jardin's manager. Victoria stared at the newspaper headline on her phone. Local reporters had been digging into her past since the viral video incident. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. A knock at her apartment door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw Dorothy, her closest friend from her wealthy days. "Victoria? I know you're in there." She opened the door, revealing her tiny studio apartment. Dorothy's eyes widened at the sparse furnishings and stack of unpaid bills. "Oh, Vicky," Dorothy whispered. "Why didn't you tell me? And admit I'd lost everything?" Victoria sank onto her worn couch. "The crash of '08 took everything. My house, my savings, my marriage. But all those charity events you attend. I volunteer to get in. These clothes, borrowed or thrift store finds." Victoria laughed bitterly. "I take the bus to Beverly Hills every morning and change in the restaurant bathroom." Dorothy sat beside her friend. "I have something to tell you too." She pulled out a letter. "I lost everything last month. An investment scam. They took my retirement savings." Victoria stared at her friend. "But your country club membership?" "Canceled yesterday. I'm living on Social Security now." Dorothy touched Victoria's hand. "We're not that different from that old man you threw out." Victoria's phone buzzed again. Janet's text read, "Time's up. Story goes live tomorrow." Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his modest home office, reviewing old photographs. He'd been investigating Victoria's past ever since the incident. "Look what I found, Emily," he said as his granddaughter entered. He handed her a stack of photos from the old Woolworths days. Emily gasped. In one photo, a young Victoria served coffee to her grandparents. Sarah's warm smile beamed at the camera, while Marcus counted out what looked like a generous tip. "Every Sunday for 2 years, Marcus explained. "Your grandmother knew Victoria was studying business at night school. We always left extra tips to help with her books." "Why didn't you tell me this before? Sometimes people need to remember who they were to become who they should be." Across town, Janet prepared to publish her exposé about Victoria's past. But her phone rang, an unlisted number. "Hello, Janet," a familiar voice said. "Remember me? Marcus Thompson." "Who?" "Table 7, every Sunday at Woolworths. You and Victoria were waitresses together." Janet's hand froze over her keyboard. "I remember how you stole from Victoria's tip jar when she wasn't looking," Marcus continued. "Just like you're trying to steal from her now." "How did you?" "The question is, what would your current employers think about your past?" The line went dead. Janet stared at her screen, then slowly deleted the exposé. Back at Le Jardin, Emily found another old photo slipped under her office door. This one showed Sarah helping a young Victoria with her college applications. Emily's phone rang. The local news wanted a statement about Victoria's past. "No comment," Emily said firmly, remembering her grandmother's words about dignity. That evening, Victoria sat alone in the empty restaurant, staring at her old Woolworths name tag. She didn't hear Emily approach. "Found something interesting today," Emily said, placing the old photos on the table. Victoria picked up the photos, her hands shaking. Memories flooded back. Sarah's encouragement, Marcus's generous tips, their kindness. "That man I threw out," Victoria's voice broke. "It was Marcus, wasn't it?" Emily nodded. "I didn't recognize." Victoria covered her face. "I've become everything I once hated." Outside, protesters still gathered. Inside, two women sat in silence, surrounded by old photographs that told a story of forgotten kindness. What they didn't know was that Marcus Thompson had an even bigger revelation planned, one that would test everyone's capacity for forgiveness and redemption. "What do you mean, a free dinner program?" Victoria stared at Emily in disbelief. "We're already losing customers after the incident." "It's not just any program," Emily explained, holding up the press release. "The Sarah program offers free fine dining experiences to elderly citizens and veterans, no questions asked about their appearance or financial status." "Our investors will pull out immediately," Victoria protested. "The anonymous owner has already approved it," Emily said firmly. "It starts tonight." The kitchen staff gathered for the announcement, their faces showing mixed reactions. "This is Beverly Hills," the head waiter complained. "We'll lose our reputation." "We already lost that when we humiliated an elderly man," Emily reminded them. "Now we have a chance to make it right." As the staff dispersed, muttering among themselves, Victoria retreated to her office. The morning's mail included another overdue bill and a final eviction notice. The phone rang. It was the restaurant's biggest investor. "Victoria, what's this about serving free meals to homeless people?" "Sir, I tried to stop it." "Fix this, or we're pulling our investment." The first evening of the Sarah program arrived. Victoria stood nervously at her podium, watching her usual wealthy clientele eye the new guests with suspicion. Then she saw her. Dorothy walked through the door wearing a simple dress, nothing like her usual designer outfits. "Table for one," Dorothy said quietly. Victoria froze. This was her closest friend, now living on Social Security after losing everything. "Right this way, madam," Victoria managed, leading Dorothy to the best table in the house. Other diners watched. Some whispered. A few took out their phones. But something unexpected happened. As Dorothy ate her meal, she began sharing her story with nearby tables. Soon, other diners were listening, sharing their own stories of financial ups and downs. The kitchen door swung open. Emily emerged, carrying a special dessert she'd created in her grandmother's honor, Sarah's victory apple pie. "On the house," Emily announced, serving it to every table. "My grandmother's recipe. She used to make this at Woolworth's." As the evening progressed, more program participants arrived. Each was treated with the same dignity as any other guest. Then a food critic walked in, dressed in worn clothes. "I heard about your program," he said, revealing his identity. "I wanted to experience it myself." Victoria led him to his table, her hands trembling slightly. The next morning, his review went viral. Le Jardin doesn't just serve food, it serves dignity. The Sarah program transforms a meal into a reminder that we're all worthy of respect. 5 stars. Celebrities began showing up dressed in simple clothes, supporting the cause. Social media exploded with positive coverage. But not everyone was happy. Regular wealthy clients canceled reservations. Staff members threatened to quit. "We need to end this program," Victoria told Emily desperately. "We're losing everything I built." "No," Emily replied. "We're building something better." That evening, Dorothy returned with 5 other former socialites who'd lost everything in various financial disasters. They sat together, sharing stories and tears. Victoria served them personally, finally understanding what Sarah had tried to teach her all those years ago at Woolworth's. As she cleared Dorothy's plate, her friend grabbed her hand. "Thank you," Dorothy whispered, "for treating me like a human being." Victoria glanced at Sarah's photo on the wall, remembering the woman who'd helped her with college applications, who'd believed in her when she was just a waitress. The restaurant was changing, but more importantly, hearts were changing. What no one knew was that Marcus Thompson watched it all from afar, smiling. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2, a revelation that would leave Beverly Hills speechless. Victoria stared at the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. Final warning. 24 hours to vacate. Inside, she opened her purse, $43 and some change. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications about the Sarah program's success, but her personal reality was crumbling. A knock at the door made her jump. It was Emily. "You didn't show up for the morning staff meeting," Emily said, then stopped short as she took in the apartment. A sleeping bag in the corner, boxes packed, cup noodles on a hot plate. "Come to fire me?" Victoria asked, trying to maintain her dignity. "No, I came to understand." Victoria laughed bitterly. Understand what? That the great Victoria Sterling lives like this? That I take 3 buses to work? That I change clothes in the restaurant bathroom? Why didn't you tell anyone? And admit I'm just like the people I've been turning away? Victoria sank onto her sleeping bag. Tomorrow I'll be homeless, just like, she couldn't finish the sentence, like my grandfather? Emily supplied quietly. Before Victoria could respond, another knock echoed through the apartment. Through the peephole, she saw Mr. Harrison, her former boss from the investment firm. Victoria, please, I need to talk to you. Emily watched as Victoria opened the door. Mr. Harrison stood there in worn clothes, nothing like the powerful CEO he'd once been. They took everything, he said simply. The SEC investigation, I'm bankrupt. Victoria stared at her former boss, the man who'd fired her after the 2008 crash. I saw the news about the Sarah program, he continued. I need a meal, Victoria. I haven't eaten in 2 days. The mighty had fallen. Just like her. Back at Le Jardin, celebrities were making reservations just to support the program. Social media influencers arrived in simple clothes, sharing stories about dignity and respect. Victoria led Mr. Harrison to a table, serving him herself. As she poured his water, she noticed something on the wall she'd never paid attention to before, one of Sarah's old Woolworths aprons framed. I remember this, Mr. Harrison said, following her gaze. You used to wear one just like it? Before I promoted you. Victoria touched the apron gently. Suddenly, a memory hit her. Sarah Thompson adjusting her apron strings, teaching her the proper way to carry plates. You were a good waitress, Mr. Harrison continued. Always treated everyone the same, rich or poor. What happened to me? Victoria whispered. The same thing that happened to me, he replied. We forgot where we came from. That evening, as Victoria prepared to return to her soon-to-be-lost apartment, Emily stopped her. I convinced the owner to let you use the small room upstairs, Emily said, just until you find a new place. Why would you help me? After what I did to your grandfather. Because that's what my grandmother would have done. As Victoria settled into the small room that night, she found an old photo album on the bed. Inside were pictures from Woolworths, herself as a young waitress, Sarah training her, Marcus leaving his generous tips. She picked up one photo, herself serving an elderly couple with a smile, not a trace of judgment in her expression. I remember that day. A voice said from the doorway. It was Marcus Thompson. Victoria stood quickly, her heart pounding. You were saving for college, he continued. Sarah helped you apply. Mr. Thompson, You know what Sarah told me that day? Marcus stepped into the room. That girl has a heart of gold. She just needs someone to believe in her. Victoria's masks finally crumbled. Years of pretense fell away as tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I know, Marcus replied simply. That's why we're going to help you remember who you really are. Outside the window, the Beverly Hills lights sparkled. But for the first time in years, Victoria didn't feel the need to pretend she was part of that glittering world. Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember what you had all along. Well, Victoria Sterling serving tables again. Victoria froze at the familiar voice. Richard, her ex-husband, stood at the entrance of Le Jardin, watching her clear dishes. What are you doing here, Richard? Can't a man check on his ex-wife, especially when she's all over social media? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The Sarah program. How touching. Victoria felt her hands shake. Richard had left her right after the 2008 crash, when they lost everything. I saw the viral video, he continued. You throwing out that old man, then this dramatic turnaround. Very clever. He pulled out his phone, showing her their old society photos. Remember when we were them? Before you lost all my money in bad investments? Emily watched the exchange from the kitchen, seeing Victoria's distress. She started toward them, but Dorothy arrived first. Richard, Dorothy said coldly, still blaming Victoria for your own failed investments? Richard's smile faltered. Dorothy, I heard you're poor now too. How tragic. Actually, Dorothy replied, I've never felt richer. Victoria, we need you in the kitchen. Sarah's special is selling out. As Victoria escaped to the kitchen, Emily confronted a moral dilemma. She knew Richard's presence could destroy Victoria's progress, but revealing her grandfather's identity could protect her. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Let her fight her own battles. Real strength comes from within. In the kitchen, Victoria leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Emily found her there, clutching an old photograph. "I found this in Sarah's album," Victoria said, showing Emily the photo. "Your grandmother helped me leave him. Gave me money for a lawyer." The photo showed a younger Victoria with Sarah at Woolworths, both smiling. "I never paid her back," Victoria whispered. "You don't repay kindness with money," Emily replied. "You repay it by showing kindness to others." Richard's voice carried from the dining room. He was telling other customers about Victoria's past. Dorothy approached Victoria again. "There's something I never told you. Years ago, when I lost everything, Sarah Thompson helped me too." "What?" "She found out I was living in my car, brought me food every day, never told anyone." Dorothy touched Victoria's hand. "She made me promise to help others when I got back on my feet. I failed that promise, until now." Victoria took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and walked back into the dining room. "Richard," she said clearly, "you need to leave." "Or what? You'll throw me out like that old man?" He laughed. "I know you're living in a room above the restaurant. How far the mighty have fallen." "No, Richard, I haven't fallen. I've remembered who I am." She picked up a pot of coffee, just like she used to at Woolworths. "Would anyone like a refill?" The other customers, many of them Sarah program participants, raised their cups. Richard stood there, power slipping away. "You'll regret this." "No," Victoria replied. "The only thing I regret is forgetting where I came from." After Richard left, Dorothy revealed one final secret. That she handed Victoria an envelope. Inside was a letter from Sarah, dated just before she died. "Dear Victoria, if you're reading this, you've remembered your true self. The girl who served coffee with a smile and treated everyone like they mattered. Keep that spirit alive. It's worth more than all the wealth in Beverly Hills." Victoria looked at Emily. "Your grandmother knew this would happen?" Emily smiled. "She knew a lot of things, including who would help you remember your heart." The letter had one more line. "P.S. When you're ready, Marcus will show you the way." Victoria didn't know it yet, but Sarah's words were about to take on a whole new meaning. The biggest revelation was still to come. Les Jardins buzzed with excitement. The first anniversary celebration had drawn a full house, mixing wealthy regulars with Sarah program participants. Victoria stood in front of the mirror in her small room above the restaurant, holding her resignation letter. Despite the program's success, shame still haunted her about the viral video incident. A knock at her door. "Victoria?" Emily called. "It's time." Downstairs, the dining room sparkled. Local news cameras set up in the corners. Everyone waited for the mysterious owner to finally be revealed. Victoria's hand trembled as she reached for the microphone. "Before we begin, I have something to say." She pulled out her resignation letter. "After what I did, I don't deserve." "Actually," a familiar voice interrupted, "I'd like to speak first." Marcus Thompson walked to the front of the room. The same man she'd humiliated months ago now commanded everyone's attention. "Many of you know me as the homeless man who was thrown out of this restaurant," he began. "Some of you recorded it on your phones." The room fell silent. "What you don't know is that I'm the owner of Les Jardins." Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed. Victoria felt her knees weaken. "But this isn't about me," Marcus continued. "It's about my late wife, Sarah. You see, she was a waitress at Woolworths, just like Victoria Sterling used to be." Victoria's eyes widened. He knew. He'd always known. 40 years ago, Sarah and I were poor. She worked double shifts so I could study programming. One of her trainees was a young girl named Victoria who was studying business at night school. The cameras turned to Victoria, who stood frozen. Sarah believed in Victoria, helped her apply to college, because Sarah knew what it meant to be judged by your appearance. Marcus pulled out an old photo. This was taken the day Victoria got accepted to business school. The photo showed Sarah hugging a young, beaming Victoria. Life took many turns. Victoria succeeded, then lost everything in 2008. Instead of reaching out, she built walls, started judging others the way she feared being judged. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. But Sarah never lost faith in her. Before she died, she made me promise to help Victoria remember who she really was. Marcus smiled, even if it meant letting her throw me out of my own restaurant. The room erupted in murmurs. "You planned this?" Victoria whispered. "Sarah did," Marcus replied. She knew you'd need a wake-up call, knew that only by facing your own prejudices could you find yourself again. Emily stepped forward, carrying a box. Inside was Victoria's old Woolworths uniform. My grandmother kept it all these years, Emily said. She wanted you to have it back when you were ready. Victoria touched the fabric, memories flooding back. She turned to the crowd, her voice shaking. I forgot who I was, she admitted. Spent years pretending to be someone else, judging others the way I feared being judged. She straightened her shoulders. But Sarah never gave up on me, and now I'll never give up on others. Marcus raised his glass, to Sarah's legacy, and to Victoria, who finally found her way home. The cameras rolled as Victoria hugged Emily, then Marcus. Social media exploded with the story. Homeless millionaire's master plan for redemption. But the real story wasn't about millions or master plans. It was about a waitress named Sarah who believed in people when they stopped believing in themselves. Dorothy stood up. I have an announcement too. She held up an old photo of herself, Sarah, and Victoria at Woolworths. We were called the Three Musketeers. All for one, and one for all. It's time we lived up to that again. The evening wasn't over yet. Marcus had one more surprise. One that would transform Le Jardin from a restaurant into a movement. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced, there's one more thing Sarah wanted for Le Jardin. He led the crowd to a special corner of the restaurant, where a single table stood apart from the others. Above it hung Sarah's first Woolworths apron. This is Sarah's table, he explained. A place where anyone can eat, regardless of their ability to pay. No questions asked, no judgments made. Victoria stepped forward. I'd like to be the one to serve this table, every day. Critics immediately took to social media. PR stunt to save failing restaurant. Fake redemption story. But then the stories started coming in. A retired teacher who lost her pension, a veteran struggling to make ends meet, a former executive living in his car, each found dignity at Sarah's table. This is terrible for our image, a wealthy regular complained to Victoria. We're leaving for good. I understand, Victoria replied, serving coffee to an elderly man at Sarah's table. But we can't put image above humanity anymore. The restaurant's high society regulars began canceling their memberships. But for every wealthy client who left, 10 new customers arrived. Emily worried about the financial impact, but Marcus remained calm. Your grandmother always said true wealth isn't in your wallet. Then Victoria faced her biggest test. Her ex-husband Richard returned with a group of wealthy investors. We're prepared to offer you $50 million for Le Jardin, Richard announced. This charity act has gotten enough publicity. Time to return to proper business. Before Marcus could respond, Victoria spoke up. I remember when you left me because I lost your money, Richard said I wasn't worth anything without wealth. She straightened her apron. But Sarah Thompson taught me that worth isn't measured in dollars, so no, Le Jardin isn't for sale. Richard sneered. Still the same foolish waitress. Yes, Victoria smiled. I am, and proud of it. That evening, a food critic wrote, at Le Jardin, they don't just serve meals, they serve dignity. And dignity, unlike caviar, is priceless. The article went viral. Celebrities began requesting to serve at Sarah's table. Social media influencers shared stories of kindness and transformation. But the real transformation happened quietly, one meal at a time. A woman sat at Sarah's table, hiding her tears. Victoria recognized her. A former socialite who'd attended her glamorous parties years ago. I lost everything, the woman whispered. Victoria poured her coffee. No, you just forgot what real wealth looks like. I did too, once. Emily watched from the kitchen as Victoria served table after table, the same grace she'd shown as a young waitress at Woolworths shining through. Dorothy joined her. You know what your grandmother told me once? She said Victoria would find her way back, that sometimes you have to lose your way to find your true path. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching it all. Sarah's vision was coming true, but in a way none of them had expected. The wealthy clients who'd left, they started returning, not for exclusivity, but for something they'd lost in their privileged lives. Connection. Real human connection. One evening, a reporter asked Victoria about her transformation from disgraced manager to beacon of hope. I didn't transform, she replied, serving coffee at Sarah's table. I remembered. There's a difference. As she spoke, An elderly couple walked in, looking hesitant. "Welcome to Le Jardin," Victoria smiled, leading them to Sarah's table. "Let me tell you about the amazing woman this table is named after." The restaurant had found its true purpose, not as a symbol of status, but as a reminder that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. And somewhere, Sarah Thompson was smiling. Emily sat in her office, staring at test results from her doctor. The same symptoms her grandmother had shown in the early stages: fatigue, stress, concerning blood work. "You need to slow down," the doctor had warned. The restaurant's success is taking its toll. Le Jardin had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. News outlets called it the Dignity Revolution. Other restaurants across the country were adopting the Sarah program. Celebrities competed to serve at Sarah's table. A knock at her door. Marcus entered, concern etched on his face. "You look just like her," he said quietly. "Working too hard, just like Sarah did. Grandpa, we have 3 more restaurants wanting to franchise, speaking requests, a book deal about the program. I can't slow down now." Marcus sat down heavily. "I've been thinking about selling part of the business." "What?" "No. Emily, look at yourself. Your grandmother wouldn't want." "Don't," Emily cut him off. "Don't use Grandma to make me feel guilty." Victoria burst in, waving a newspaper. "You won't believe who's here." She stopped, sensing the tension. "What's wrong?" Emily pushed the medical results aside. "Nothing. Who's here?" "Remember those people from the trailer park? The ones who helped your grandparents? They're all at Sarah's table." They headed to the dining room. A group of elderly people sat at the large table, their faces weathered but familiar. "Been saving up for months to come here," one man said. "We all have." An elderly woman grabbed Emily's hand. "Your grandmother borrowed my textbooks when she was studying restaurant management. Now look at this place." Another spoke up. "We've started a community fund back home. Helping folks like your grandparents helped us, calling it the Sarah Thompson Foundation." Emily felt tears forming. These people, living on fixed incomes, had created a foundation in her grandmother's name. Victoria served them coffee, just like Sarah had taught her. "Tell us more about this foundation." "We help people study, get certifications, start small businesses." The man smiled. "Just like Sarah and Marcus did for us." Marcus watched quietly from the corner, remembering those early days. The whole trailer park had pitched in, watching Emily while Sarah worked double shifts and he studied programming. Later that evening, Dorothy arrived with surprising news. "The country club that rejected my membership after I lost everything? They want to partner with Le Jardin, host a Sarah program dinner." Emily shook her head. Victoria laughed. "No, it's perfect. Sarah would love it." They gathered in the kitchen after closing. Emily's medical results lay on the table between them. "I can handle the expansion," Victoria offered. "You need rest." "We all help," Dorothy added. "That's what the 3 Musketeers taught us." Marcus pulled out an old photo album. Inside was a picture of the trailer park community having Sunday dinner together. "Your grandmother built more than a restaurant, Emily. She built a community, and a community runs on many hands, not just one." Emily looked at the faces around her. Victoria, who'd found her way back to herself. Dorothy, who'd discovered true friendship. The trailer park residents, paying forward decades-old kindness. "Okay," she finally said. "Let's do it together." They stayed late into the night, planning. The Sarah program would expand, but sustainably. The community fund would grow. New partnerships would form. As they talked, more memories surfaced. Stories of Sarah's kindness, her wisdom, her belief that everyone deserved a chance. "You know what Sarah told me once?" Dorothy mused. She said, "Success isn't about rising above others. It's about lifting them up with you." Outside, the Beverly Hills lights sparkled. Inside, a group of people from different worlds sat around a kitchen table, planning how to spread Sarah's legacy of dignity. They didn't know it yet, but their biggest challenge and triumph was just around the corner. Christmas Eve brought an unexpected challenge to Le Jardin. The worst storm in Beverly Hills history threatened to disrupt their special holiday dinner for isolated seniors and veterans. "The roads are flooding," Victoria reported, watching the news. "Most of our guests won't be able to make it." Emily looked at the fully decorated dining room. Sarah's table had been expanded for the occasion, stretching through the center of the restaurant. Each place setting included a handwritten card and a small gift. "Then we'll go to them," Marcus said simply. In this storm? Dorothy asked. My wife served coffee during the '89 earthquake, Marcus replied. Said everyone needs dignity, especially in tough times. Victoria straightened her apron. I'll drive the catering van. What happened next would become legend in Beverly Hills. The team split into groups. Victoria and Dorothy took the van to the senior centers. Emily coordinated food preparation. Marcus made calls to his old tech industry contacts. Within an hour, a fleet of luxury cars arrived at Le Jardin. CEOs, venture capitalists, and tech entrepreneurs, all ready to become delivery drivers for the evening. Marcus helped most of us get our start, one CEO explained. Time to pay it forward. The restaurant transformed into a command center. Staff packed individual meals, each containing Emily's special holiday menu. Regular customers arrived despite the storm, asking how they could help. As the deliveries began, something magical happened. The wealthy volunteers found themselves sitting with their elderly recipients, sharing meals and stories. Barriers of class and status melted away over hot turkey and Sarah's famous apple pie. Victoria and Dorothy delivered to their old social circle, former wealthy friends who'd lost everything. But instead of awkwardness, they found connection. Soon, they were all sharing stories about Sarah, each remembering a different kindness she'd shown them. Back at Le Jardin, Emily unveiled the wall of aprons, dozens of waitress uniforms from different diners and restaurants, each representing someone Sarah had helped during her lifetime. The centerpiece was her original Woolworths uniform, surrounded by photos and letters from people whose lives she'd touched. A reporter who'd braved the storm asked Emily for a comment about the wall. Each apron tells a story, Emily explained. Not just about serving food, but about serving humanity. My grandmother believed every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. As the evening progressed, more people arrived despite the weather. The restaurant's regulars sat side by side with Sarah program participants. Children from the trailer park community presented Marcus with a handmade book of stories about Sarah, collected from people she'd helped over the years. Then came the surprise that left everyone speechless. Marcus opened a large envelope, revealing Sarah's old diary. I've been waiting for the right moment to share this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The diary contained detailed plans not just for Le Jardin, but for a nationwide movement. Sarah had spent her final years mapping out how to transform the restaurant industry's approach to social responsibility. Look at the date, Marcus pointed out. She wrote this the day after Victoria started at Woolworths. The entry read, Met a young waitress today. She reminds me of myself, proud, determined, a bit lost. Someday, she'll help prove that true class has nothing to do with money. Just watch. Victoria read the words through tears. All those years ago, Sarah had seen something in her that she'd forgotten about herself. The diary contained more revelations. Sarah had predicted the 2008 crash would create a generation of hidden poverty among the formerly wealthy. She'd planned the Sarah program decades before it existed, writing, sometimes people need to lose everything to remember their humanity. And sometimes those who fall need angels disguised as waitresses to help them back up. As midnight approached, the storm began to clear. The delivery teams returned with stories that touched everyone's hearts. CEOs had found themselves washing dishes for elderly veterans. Socialites had sat on worn couches, sharing pie with former housekeepers. Real connections had been forged. Dorothy stood up to make an announcement. The country club that had once rejected her was transforming its formal dining room into a community space, complete with its own Sarah's table. Then Victoria shared her news. She'd been helping other former wealthy individuals start support groups, creating a network of people who understood that losing everything didn't mean losing your worth. Emily revealed the expansion plans, not just more restaurants, but community centers, job training programs, and dignity restoration projects, all built on Sarah's principles. The evening ended with Marcus gathering everyone around Sarah's table. He pulled out one final item, Sarah's last apron, never worn. On it, she'd stitched words that would become their motto: serve with love, lead with dignity, remember your roots. As the group stood together, wealthy and poor, famous and forgotten, servers and served, they realized Sarah's true legacy. It wasn't just about food or restaurants or programs. It was about remembering our shared humanity. The storm had passed, but its impact remained. That Christmas Eve, Le Jardin became more than a restaurant. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in dignity. The next morning, as dawn broke over Beverly Hills, Emily found her grandfather sitting at Sarah's table. "Look what I found in the diary," he said, showing her the final page. Sarah had written, "To my dear Emily, someday you'll run this restaurant and you'll face a choice. Choose dignity over profit, humanity over status, love over fear. That's the real recipe for success." Emily touched the worn pages. She knew, all along she knew. "Your grandmother," Marcus smiled, "had a way of seeing the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves." As they prepared to open for Christmas Day, a line had already formed outside. People from all walks of life, drawn together by a legacy of love and dignity that began with a simple waitress who believed in the power of kindness. The sign above Sarah's table glowed softly. "All are welcome here." No exceptions. And in Beverly Hills, where image had always been everything, a quiet revolution of hearts continued to spread, proving that sometimes the greatest wealth comes from remembering who you are and helping others remember who they can become. Victoria adjusted her apron, ready to serve another day at Sarah's table. The wealthy woman who had once judged others by their appearance now greeted each guest the same way Sarah had taught her years ago at Woolworth's, with a warm smile and the simple words, "Welcome home." That evening, as the last guests were finishing their Christmas dinner, Marcus brought out one more surprise from Sarah's collection. A small wooden box he'd never shown anyone. "Sarah made me promise to open this on the first Christmas when everything was right," he said, gathering everyone around Sarah's table. Inside were letters, dozens of them, each addressed to someone in the room. Sarah had written them during her final days, somehow knowing who would be there that night. Dorothy opened hers first, hands trembling. "Dear Dorothy, when you lose everything material, you find out what truly matters. Use your experience to help others remember their worth isn't in their wallet. You were always meant to be more than a socialite, you were meant to be a light." Victoria's letter was next. "Victoria, my dear student, by now you've remembered who you really are. That scared young waitress who helped an elderly couple count their coins for coffee will help others find their dignity again. That's why I chose you. That's why Marcus had to let you fall so you could rise stronger." Emily wiped tears as she read hers. "My dearest granddaughter, running a restaurant isn't about serving food. It's about serving hope. The recipes I left you aren't just about ingredients. They're about love, dignity, and remembrance. Lead with your heart, just like you did in my kitchen all those years ago." The storm outside had cleared, but guests stayed, sharing stories about Sarah. The former CEO, who now washed dishes, revealed how Sarah had paid for his daughter's medical bills 30 years ago when he was just a struggling programmer. A local news crew, stranded by the storm, captured it all. The reporter, moved by what she witnessed, asked Marcus for a statement. "My wife believed wealth wasn't about what you had," he said, "but about what you gave. She spent 40 years serving coffee and saving lives. Today, her legacy serves something even more important: dignity." As midnight approached, Victoria proposed a new tradition. Each Christmas Eve, Sarah's table would extend through the entire restaurant, removing all barriers between wealthy and poor, servers and served. Dorothy announced the creation of the Sarah Thompson Dignity Foundation, funded by former country club members, dedicated to helping people who lost everything find their way back to themselves. The trailer park residents shared their own surprise. They'd started a scholarship fund for young waitresses wanting to study business, named in Sarah's honor. Emily, standing in her grandmother's old apron, realized Sarah's true recipe for success. Mix equal parts love and opportunity. Remove all traces of judgment, and serve with endless dignity. The evening ended with one final revelation. Marcus gathered everyone around the wall of aprons and removed a brick, revealing a hidden time capsule Sarah had placed there during the restaurant's construction. Inside was a guest book, its pages blank except for the first one. Sarah had written, "To all who find their way to this table, you are not defined by your wealth or poverty, your past or present. You are defined by how you treat others in their moments of need. Sign this book, not with your name, but with your promise to carry this legacy forward. That night, the book filled with promises. CEOs pledged to hire based on character, not credentials. Former socialites promised to mentor those who lost everything. Waitresses vowed to serve dignity with every meal. As Christmas morning dawned, Le Jardin had transformed from a simple restaurant into a movement. Sarah's vision had blossomed beyond anyone's imagination. Victoria, Emily, and Dorothy, the new three musketeers, stood at Sarah's table, ready to carry the legacy forward. The wall of aprons behind them told stories of humble beginnings, hard falls, and dignified recoveries. Outside, the Beverly Hills sun rose on a changed community. The storm had washed away more than just rain. It had cleansed old prejudices, restored forgotten connections, and reminded everyone that true wealth isn't found in bank accounts. Marcus placed Sarah's last apron in a new frame. The words she'd stitched now a beacon for all who entered. Serve with love, lead with dignity, remember your roots. And in that moment, everyone understood. This wasn't just a Christmas miracle. It was Sarah Thompson's final gift. A reminder that every person, no matter their circumstances, deserves to be treated with dignity. The sign above Sarah's table glowed with new meaning. All are welcome here. No exceptions. In Beverly Hills, where image had always been everything, a quiet revolution continued to spread, proving that sometimes the greatest wealth comes from remembering who you are and helping others remember who they can become. The legacy of a simple waitress had transformed not just a restaurant, but a community's heart. And that was just the beginning.